Hello, hello. What's going on, everyone? Hello, Think First. Nice to see you again. Today we're going to be talking about front-end web dev. Let me get these things sorted out first. Okay, what is going on, everyone? My name is Zane. I'll be teaching you guys about front-end web development today. Very basics, the very fundamentals. Should be a pretty fun time. What's going on, Anish? Thanks for joining us. Let's get rid of this banner here because we'll be starting right now. Let me post the event link to Intro to Web Dev. Make sure to register. Sign in for the event if you haven't yet. What's going on, everyone? How's your day going? Whether it's morning, evening, what have you. Here, let me just get this pulled up. Oops. Okay. Hello, hello. Yeah, nice to see everyone here. Okay, well, we're just going to jump into it at this point. Today we're going to be talking about the basics of web dev, specifically front-end web dev. We're going to be talking about things like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, how to build very basic websites, web apps, how those tools are used within web development as a whole. So should be pretty fun. Has anyone here done web development before? Is this your guys' first time, or are you experienced? Just curious, always nice to know. Is this your first time, or is this your bit experience with it flavor? Web dev is something that I've delved into quite a bit myself. I think I've been learning it for about 1.5 years. It's definitely interested. Okay, Tatra, experience in web dev. Awesome. Always nice to see that. Yeah, it's a nice little area of programming as a whole. So here, let's get started. So MLH Global Hack Week. Okay. So let's start with just the basics of a web page, really conceptualizing it in terms of what exactly goes into one. Really start to pick things apart. Like, let's use MLH's site, or you can use Google. Either or works perfectly fine. So I'm going to share my screen. Dive right into it. Okay, so here we have a basic web page. We have Google. So with any website, there's 3 fundamental aspects to it. There's the structure, there's the presentation, and there's the function. So let's see what we can do here. You can see I can, I'm actually loading up my browser DevTools. So Google, I mean, depends on the web browser, but browsers like Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, and browsers developed from those browsers, I guess you could say, often have developer tools like I just pulled up. Just pressed F12. Now I can analyze the web page. But I mean, it seems a little bit technical, but don't be too put off by it. What we're going to do here is just analyze these different aspects of the web page. Again, the structure, the presentation, and the function. So I can see here on this right-hand side, I have the structure of the web page. I have all these different elements that are represented here that correspond to actual things on the page. So I can see here, I can take like the logo image, right? I can see it corresponds to this this entity here in the code. Keep going down. You can see I'm getting into the search menu, or the search entities here. Like I have the search bar, I have the little search button here, these images that represent them, so on and so forth. So I have just the basic elements that make up the page. Now we had something last time that I ran that people got a kick out of. If I do this, I start to take away a bit of the styling of the page. It looks a bit wonky now. In fact, it looks very wonky. I could do the same on any web page. So say for MLH's web page, and go here, run this, and the content and everything is still here, right? But the presentation now is all messed up, to say the least. So here we have all the content, and if I now analyze this, it's a little bit more straightforward. Let's say we can do this. I go down, you can see I have all these different elements we're going through. So when we have the content, it's not just good enough to have the content. We also have to worry about the presentation, making sure that everything looks nice and is digestible, and is even the content itself is easily parsed and interactable for the user. So these two areas, what I'm calling content, what I'm calling presentation, they correspond to the markup technologies known as HTML and CSS, respectively. You might have heard of these before. Let me keep up with the chat here. Seen that happen before sometimes while loading a web page. Yes, so this presentation that I'm talking about is your CSS code. And sometimes when a web page loads, most of the time you want to see this, right? Where you have your HTML and CSS working nicely. But sometimes when you load it, your CSS fails to load. And then guess what happens? Boom, you get this. And you have to try and use this mess, right? Not fun at all. What we typically do is we want our CSS. So we refresh, that'll fix it at times. But anyways, kind of the whole point to this is that even when you put in your content for your web page, that's not the full story, right? You also have to write code for the presentation of it, right? These are just two different aspects of the page. The final aspect that we're talking about now would be the function inherent to the page. So for example, this is something that we just kind of take for granted. Like if I have this hamburger menu up here and I click it, it opens up the navigation bar. So I have all these different options here. But that doesn't just automatically happen typically in a web page. You have to, because when I click this button, I could have it do a million different things if I really wanted to. Think about like a light switch in your house. The switch could turn on your lights. You could also have it turn on your fan. You could have it turn on the garbage disposal. You could have one singular switch do quite a lot of things in all sorts of different ways. Same thing with this hamburger menu here. It's intuitive for it to open up our navigation menu, but it's not an inherent behavior with something like this. We actually have to manually code it. And we have a particular tool for doing that, namely JavaScript. So overall, I know we're kind of taking what's the word for that? Kind of taking a travel, kind of taking a journey through these different aspects of a web page. You can kind of see what I'm talking about here. We have the content, which is like our text, our images, kind of forms the basis of it. But we also have the presentation of our content. How are the text, images, so on and so forth, visually represented? And from there, we also have aspects of function, like clicking this hamburger menu. So your content is your HTML, as we saw here. This is actually our HTML markup, our HTML code, people will call it, which represents our different elements in the page. You can see how I hover it here. For the styling of your HTML, for the presentation of it, we have our CSS code, which we can find in, what can we find in here? I'm jumping in blind right now. Let's see. Here we have our CSS code. So we can see that we have, we're setting background colors here, text colors, all sorts of different things. This is describing how our code should look. Usually you can do, let me see. Anyways, we'll delve into CSS files in a little bit. And we also have the function of our code with JavaScript. So, what's up, Skiddy? Nice to see you. Nice to see you. I seem like I have some fans at this point. I see you and I see Thinkverse a lot at my MLH streams. It's super cool. I appreciate it. So right now we're just talking about the basics of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, how they manifest in the web page. Now, I think we kind of get the basics of that, at least how a web page can be divided up into these three separate aspects. However, while people will learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript independently, and we're going to see all three of those and work with all three of them in just a moment. Although people work with them independently, ultimately, you have to utilize them to achieve the ultimate goal, which is your one unified web page, your one singular web page. So if I'm writing if I have my HTML content here, I can see I have some text here. I have this button. I have an image, more text. I want to make sure that when I write my CSS, that I'm actually styling things in a logical way. Like here, how everything lays out in such an intuitive, easy to read, easy to digest manner. Again, worst case, well, not even a worst case if you really have a mischievous imagination in terms of getting this website to be functional. One of the worst cases is your CSS just is complete nonsense, like here, right? So we need CSS to make our HTML accessible to the user. We need HTML so that there's things accessible to the user, so that there's actual content on the page. And we need JavaScript so that users can interact with the content on the page in a meaningful way, with whatever interaction there needs to be. So we treat HTML, CSS, JavaScript as three separate things at first, because it's just easier to learn that way. But ultimately, they all have to strive towards one singular web page. Hello, Zumpher. How's it going? Interested in learning some web dev, see how the front end works, creating a website for a portfolio. Yeah, that's a perfect project, perfect way to also learn web dev. So you took JavaScript before, but didn't finish the course, a little bit. Yeah, it sounds like you have a bit of a background at least. HTML, how it looks, CSS style, JS functionality. So it's not as clear cut. I'd say HTML is more of the content of the web page. CSS is more so how it looks, and JavaScript is more the functionality. But the lines definitely blur. That's more of a simplified, well, maybe not simplified, but that's how it works in the most basic cases. But lines will definitely blur at different points. But it's good enough for a fundamental understanding. So, with all that said and done, let's start jumping into learning about each of these different aspects of what goes into a web page. Right? How do we make the structure with HTML or the content either or with HTML? How do we make the styling with CSS? How do we make the functioning with JavaScript? We are going to go into that right now. So let's go and juggle around my screen shares. Give me 1 second. Okay, so we're going to make a little website together. I've made a gonna make a little website together. Just made the directory. I'm gonna open it in my VS Code so that we can see our code that we're gonna be working on. So, oops, here we go. Okay, so I'm gonna make a file called index.html. We're just gonna learn some of the basics about HTML. Here you can see I have my project here. Get rid of these. I just made a file index.html. Index.html, you can call the HTML file anything that you want. Index is the very common name for a site's homepage. In fact, certain web crawling tools will look specifically for index.html when looking to get basic information about a website. So we're going to treat this as our default page, our homepage for this imaginary site. Well, not too imaginary because we'll actually be putting this together. But index.html it is. Again, you can call it anything. If you have an about page, you can call it about.html, or you can call it about -me, anything that you wish. So now that we're here, I can start to write some code. Actually, let me change this. HTML, there we go. I can start to write some code. I can say, what do we want to call this website? I don't know, let's say MLH fan website. Why not? Hello, this is a website for those who love MLH. So that goes for all of us here. So I can run this as it is. I click on go live. It'll boot up a little website that I will show you guys in just a moment. Should you follow along and create with what I'm doing? Definitely, well, it wouldn't hurt, but I guess if you feel inspired to, that's perfectly fine. This isn't put together as a as sort of a follow along tutorial, but no issue doing that. At the very least, I just want to give you guys a general cognizance of what goes into a basic web page and how HTML, CSS, JavaScript ultimately manifests that basic web page. So we have here, oh, the screen juggling is going to drive me crazy. But here we have this basic website that I will show you in just a moment. Once I get screen sharing, here we go. So I wrote that code. MLH fan website. Hello, this is a website for those who love MLH. Perfect. So it's pretty basic, but I did write HTML code and it is popping up now. Now, there's a couple of things that don't lend themselves to the easiest method of working with what I have now. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to show you my code again. And we're going to explore a little bit with adding additions to the code. So we could say, okay, this is my, oh, get out of here. So this is meant to be the title of my website, right? MLH fan website. This could be like a subtitle. Hello, this is a website for those who love MLH. And then I can go on, give a little additional text. So I love, if you love MLH, then you're in the right place. Learn more about hackathons with MLH. So I have this content here, but we saw it all just kind of loads on one line. It's all just, it all just has like a homogeneous style to it. Doesn't seem that inviting as a web page, doesn't seem that rich or anything of the sort. Well, before we even get to that, I mean, there's one issue. There's no way for the web browser or anything to know what is what. Like the web browser doesn't know that this is the title of the page, doesn't know that this is the subtitle, doesn't know that this is additional text. And two, there's no way for us to really easily, if at all, target these things for different styling, right? If we start thinking ahead to CSS. So with that, we have to introduce one of the big aspects of HTML, which is providing semantic markup. So ultimately, as we said, the web browser doesn't really know what is what. This causes a few issues. So if you have web crawlers and the like, they're going to want to be able to distinguish like what on the website is your title, what is your just additional information, so on and so forth. If you have people with screen readers that have like a visual disability, for example, that need something to read out to them, it's not going to have a way to sift through this information contextually to figure out what it should focus on to best communicate to the user. So the answer to all of this is by using, as I said, semantic markup. So we have these things, we have these HTML tags that give context, that give meaning, additional meaning to our content here. So this H1, the H tags like H1, H2, H3, it goes all the way to H6. They are heading tags. They kind of serve the purpose of being like titles in the page, like a title in a book, just something to give, just imposes hierarchy in terms of the content of the page. So like the largest title of your page would be your H1. It's kind of the title for the entire page and everything within it. And then we said that too, this is like a little subtitle. There's a couple ways that you can mark this up. H2 works for now. And so I can go on to say, okay, well, here we have, let's say this is a paragraph. So there's different HTML tags that have slightly different meanings and the like. So we have these heading ones here. This P tag is just for like standard like text that doesn't really have a hierarchical function like the headings do. And when I talk about this, it seems kind of technical, but it's really not too crazy. I promise. There's no, as long as you have like your H1 place and you don't choose really out there tags, things shouldn't go like super wonky. And two, you can always look at other websites, like simple build web pages, and see how they assign tags to things. Or you can always read up about, in fact, we should do that. We should look at MDM docs in a little bit. Well, there's also resources that give you additional information on these HTML tags, how they all work, like what they should be utilized for, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, they just give additional context. So I'd say most of the tags that you use aren't going to like fundamentally alter like the function of the text or anything. It's not really what they're there for. It's not really how they work. It's more so for just giving additional context to the browser, to the user as a result, and so on and so forth. So now we have these tags in here, and we can load the web page again. Let's go ahead and show that off. So we're going to go live here. So if I can do this, I'll show my share my screen with you all again to see our new web page. So here we can see the styling is actually a little bit different. So we said, remember, this was my H1 here. I can show this. I don't know why it's oh, that's annoying. Here, let me put this in the other tab. Slight technical difficulties, but we will persevere. Okay, here we go. So now you can see, if I load up here, if I look at the web page code now, we can see, okay, here's my H1 tag that I use with my content inside of it. Here's my H2 with the content inside, and the paragraph tags that I had. It just has this additional context here. We can also see that the styling changed. So if you remember, everything was just on the one line. In fact, I could probably do this. So let's get rid of this H1 tag. Or can I? Oh, that's probably going to be more of a, there we go. So let's say I get rid of this H1 tag. Now it lost its styling that I had. So these tags, seems like they're affecting the styling of the elements as well. And that is the case, but not for the reason that you would inherently think. So this H1 tag here, right, we saw makes the text a lot bigger, also makes it bold. That's not an attribute of the H1 tag in and of itself. It doesn't impart that styling like fundamentally. So where exactly did that styling come from? Because I didn't specify any CSS or anything of the sort, telling it to make the text larger and to make it bold. What's happening here is that the web browser has some default styles associated with the H1 and with the H2 and paragraphs, so on and so forth. It has default styles associated with these things because, well, to be able to see even just this basic text on the web page, you have to have some sort of characteristics to it in order to represent it visually. So the browser, instead of making you specify every little thing just to get the most basic showcase like here, it instead, what it does, it takes it upon itself to apply some basic styles. Now we can overwrite these. And again, it's not like inherent to the H1 tag. We can easily revert this back to, so it looks like all the other text on the page if we really wanted to. Some people get confused by that. They think that HTML has some like inherent styling to it. Not the case. The browser applies it just so that when you change something, like, how can I articulate it? It does that just so that things don't seem like arbitrary and weird. But we may not always want our H1 to be styled like this. We may not always want our H2 to be styled like this. We can have our own full control over that. And we'll go over that a little bit. We'll go into that in more detail once we actually cover CSS ourselves. But ultimately, what we really care about with all of this is just the fact that we can put these context wrappers, these HTML elements in our page that can envelop our content to give it semantic meaning. So again, when you do this, it's going to help web crawlers, it's going to help screen readers, it's also going to help you with styling in some ways a little bit down the road. Let's talk about again once we go to CSS. But yeah, this semantic aspect is it's very, very important for CSS or for HTML. And we've just seen some of the more basic tags, but there are some pretty important things that it can do as well. Here, let me keep up with the chat here. You guys are having some good conversation. Yes, accessibility. So for those that don't know, accessibility is designing your applications, your web pages, so on and so forth, for users that have different means of ableness in certain domains. So for example, people with poor eyesight may have to use a screen reader. You actively manually have to do additional things in your code and in your approach to creating your website. So one of those things, the most basic of the most basic, is doing things like adding semantic tags. So we have, so to open an HTML page, you can drag and drop it directly in the browser. That is certainly one way to do it. I myself typically just go into my Windows Explorer, my File Explorer, double click on it, that loads up. However, when you're actually developing a website, there are helpful tools that are a little bit more conducive to development, to production of your code. So I don't know if I'd be able to easily show it just with the screen share. Unless I don't know. I wish there was, can I do? No. shoot, I was going to say, if I could share like 2 screens at once, that'd be perfect. But basically, there's certain tools that can really help your life in that way. We'll talk about them a little bit later on. But let's see. Yeah, I mean, we can go into it. It is an extension in VS Code that will basically, when you make a change to your code and you save that file, the web page will automatically refresh itself and update. It's called, I think it's just called Live Server. Let me see. Super, super handy extension. Yep. It makes it so that, I think it's called Hot Reload, something like that, where the website in development will just automatically refresh itself whenever you make changes to the code to reflect those changes in the website. Otherwise, you'd have to like save your file and then manually open the HTML page each and every time. Just such a burden, such an annoyance. Anyways, so we can see that we have the use of semantic HTML now in our web page. So with that, there's a few other things that you definitely want to know how to do with HTML. One would be using images. So you have an image tag that you can utilize. We can go back to our code for that one. So can I pull this up? Yes, okay. So let's go back to our code here. Well, yeah, I guess this works for now. So we can also utilize images. So you can see I have this image tag, and HTML will also have the option for attributes. So here for the image, it's asking for a source. It's asking for some for directory for an image to be utilized. So I could say, you know, dog picture. Like imagine I had a picture saved, dogpicture.jpg. And I could boot that up on my web page, save it, and then when I load my HTML page, you can see the dog picture or the picture, whatever it is. So images can be used for there. HTML also has links that you can use. Like if you want to link to other pages on the internet or within your website, I could say, okay, well, I'm going to have a link that goes to google.com, and I can have, it's going to be a clickable link that the user can hover over, and I can say, okay, go to click this to go to Google. And so now I can show my web page again. And you'll see that you'll have that link there that can be clicked on. So I click on this, takes me to, oh, weird. Oh yeah, it's trying to look for a local directory then. So it's trying to look for like a file in the website called google.com. You have to specify like, at the very least, I think www.google.com or http blah blah google.com. But you get the gist there. We can fix that real quick. It's not a big deal. I'm not going to switch my code over though, but I am going to change that so that it is www.google.com. Refresh this. Really? HTTPS. Man, the things you get rusty on. Really? That's surprising. There we go. Okay, I need the HTTPS to it. But there, now it's properly linked up to show you that it can actually bring us to a web page. It's already live on the web. So that's your anchor tag. You saw that I used the little A. I'll show my screen again. So share screen. Window here. So you can see I had this little tag with the little A tag, the anchor tag. This is what you use for when you want to set up something that'll direct you to a different web page, whether that's within your site or within the internet as a whole. So some of these things provide context. Others actually are a gateway to basic functionality as well. But overall, I'd say if there's one, if you wanted to summarize HTML just in the most basic way, it's for the structure and content of a web page, as well as basic functionality like links, displaying images, as well as basic web forms, which we'll get to in a little bit. But just this for now works. So that's the basics of HTML. And we'll see how it leads to the content on our website and how at least to the content on our website and the structure. And with semantic HTML, we can give context to our content. So now let's delve into the basics of CSS. So I'm going to make a CSS file. Again, you can call this file anything that you want. Usually people will call it like style or styles.css or app.css. Well, not usually call it, but those are some of the very, very generic names for your basic CSS file. So we'll call it app.css. And before I write any CSS, I have to make sure that, well, before or after doesn't really matter, but if I want my CSS to show on the web page, I have to link up my HTML file with my CSS file. I have to make sure that they're communicating with each other. So that we can do that, so we can go link dot CSS here. So we have to go link relation style sheet href. This href is going to show to the, this is what's going to connect the HTML file and the CSS file together. So here I put this in here. And now what I can do is I can style any of these HTML elements. So let's say I want to style this H1 here, this heading. I can go heading, and I can say I want the text color to be red. Let's do this. Okay, so now with this color attribute applied, we'll go into a little bit of detail on this in just a moment. But just seeing that this works, we can go to our web page again. We can see on refreshing this, look at that, the H1's color changed to red. So let's look at this a little bit. In the browser, we saw that we can edit HTML, right? I was changing the text here. You can change blah, 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 like that. You can change all sorts of stuff with HTML with my browser tools, my browser dev tools. You can also explore with the HTML or with the CSS in here as well to kind of easily edit things really quickly, kind of play around, mess with things. But this is just another way to showcase some basics of CSS. So we can see that I can change the text color. I can change all sorts of stuff about how it appears. I can change, what else do I want to change? I can change the font family. So the different styles of fonts that you can use. You can change font size. You can even go, font size, you can do like 50 pixels if I wanted to, or anything that you can imagine. Text center, text align center, put in the center of the page. So here you can see how it's starting to look more like a actual website now. I mean, still very, very primitive, but you can kind of imagine how you can shift things around spatially, as you saw. You can change like font size and color and font family, so on and so forth. You can even add like a border to things if I wanted to do 1 pixel solid. If I can do that in the right order. Yeah, there we go. So I can add a border here. I can do border radius, give it a little bit of curvature. So with these sorts of tools, you can see how I can affect the styling of everything on the web page. Now, this is a pretty basic, very, very elementary, very, very primitive utilization of these, but this is how you get to a more developed, a more complex styling, like we saw earlier. So let's show, let's again show this this MLH site. right? We have this very, very beautifully laid out styling here. And if that's all from the CCS or from the CSS. So if I take that away, look how much of a mess it is again. So by using CSS, where we can change things spatially, their sizing, their colors, their fonts, anything you can imagine about the visual representation of the content, you can go from this to this. Right? Very, very powerful stuff. So in my opinion, I think that CSS is the, like, it's deceptively important in that, I don't know, I think it's the lifeblood of web pages today. Obviously, scripting and JavaScript, all of that is immensely, immensely powerful, and you can do absolutely insane things with scripting. But the ability to lay out your web page, and as we'll see in a little bit, with responsiveness and everything and all that, you can build modern, usable, sleek websites just with proper CSS. Like, I know people that make websites for small businesses where all they do is basic HTML and CSS, but their CSS skills are so good that they can just code something like this by hand, and they can boom, 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 get websites out, have a huge client base. It's pretty crazy. So I think CSS is like very deceptively powerful. So here, let's see what's going on in the chat. Yes. Excuse me. And daylight savings now. It's like gets dark so early. It's throwing off my circadian clock. Craziest of ways. Feels like it's 9 o'clock right now, like 9 p.m. But anywho, yeah. So for doing color for elements, there is like the attribute color, which changes text color, and to change background color, you do have to use the background color attribute. But with all that being said and in place, you can see how important CSS is with going on to making your website actually presentable, and not only presentable, but also inviting, approachable, usable. All these really, like, I would say, equally as important as the content, if not more so in a way. But yeah, so with that, that's kind of what CSS does for a website. Now, in terms of learning a little bit more about it, we are going to want to focus on a few different aspects of CSS. So one of the aspects we talked about, just another, again, kind of a good thing to bring up, is that your browser is going to automatically apply styles to things. So even if I disable all the CSS code that I wrote, well, we still see that this H1 is styled differently than like these paragraph tags. That's because the browser has default CSS. Again, you have to, but instead of making the user specify every little thing just to get a bare basic visual representation, the browser kind of takes it upon itself to do some basic styling to help distinguish content right out of the gate. Well, we can undo those stylings. That will save it for a little bit later once we go into more remove the aspects from like the bare basics. But with that in place, let's talk about some more fundamentals of CSS. So what we also want to cover is just like, I guess, more of the selectors, properties, values of CSS. So we saw that we could, let me get back to my code editor here. So we saw that I could target these HTML attributes, or these Gosh, I don't know what's good. I don't know why I'm yawning so much. But anyways, you can see that I target these HTML elements, like these H1s here. I could also target H2s and style them in and of themselves. I'll do H2, I can, do font size, whatever, and so on and so forth. So HTML tags you can certainly do. Now what this will do, well, on a web page you can only have one H1 tag. At least that's best practice, they say. But for all H1 tags, for example, they'll all take on these attributes. For all H2 tags, they'll all take on these styling attributes. My paragraph tags, for example, they'll all take on these stylings that I specify for them. So I say I want font size to be 25 pixels, and I want color to be, purple or whatever I want to do for them. All paragraph tags will be styled in this way. I don't have to just I can have different tags in between with content. And so maybe I could include image and so on and so forth. And then include another paragraph tag. All of these paragraph tags will be styled in the way that is specified here. So that's pretty important to know, pretty stellar, because it just helps unify or just helps homogenize and unify your styling choices and the like. It's very rare that on a web page every single individual element is going to have its own unique styling. This helps just create a consistency in your styles. So, but let's say I have a styling that I don't want every paragraph tag to have. Say I just want, maybe I have, yeah, I don't know what's going on. I swear, daylight saving times is just gaslit my body. But anyways, what was I saying? So ultimately, let's say I don't want to style every paragraph tag in the same exact way. Let's say I have a opening sentence and I want that to be bolded because I don't know, for whatever reason. I can assign an attribute. I can assign what we call a class to the HTML element, which allows me to target it specifically. So I can say class, what do we want to call this? Maybe just important message. Now with this class, I can go into HTML or into my CSS file, and I can, if I add a dot and then the class name, you can see how this text is like purple or not purple, like orange yellowish here. This tells me that I'm working with a class, which is specified with this dot at the beginning. Now I can style this class with particular attributes. So let's say I want it to have, what do I want to say for this class? Color can be, say, green. Why not? Font size can be 60 pixels. Probably a little bit obnoxious, but that should be okay. And font weights, we can say, make it bold. And what else do I want to do? Can I do font style? Make it italic, why not? So now, with this important message class, it'll have these unique stylings. So we'll see how that takes place right here, right now. So here we go. This important MLH message has those stylings. So we can check it too in our little handy dandy browser tools here. You can see that with this important message class, we have these different stylings as we specified for them. And two, we can see this is the paragraph tag that we use this class on. Now, the cool thing about classes is that we can put them on any individual element that we want. So say I want the H1 tag to be styled in the same way. I can edit as HTML. If I say, okay, class, import sent message, oops, and there we go. So I can use it on any individual element that I want. So classes are quite helpful in that way. So we've seen that we can style overall any set of HTML elements by just targeting that particular element in and of itself. Like we see that we have some stylings for the P element, for any paragraph element, and they'll be applied to all of them. We can use classes to target particular ones, or a set of particular elements. The last one to kind of know about would be your ID. So here, let's see. So how do we incorporate the CSS file with the HTML file? Very good question. What you can do, let me switch back to my code editor here. I'll show you exactly how to do that. Man. Okay, so my HTML file, the way that you connect the two is you want to include this here. You want to go link, relation, style sheet, href, the name of your CSS file. So this link, even just hovering over it gives a pretty good definition. So the link element allows authors to link their document to other resources. So this is saying, okay, I want to link to some other file or resource or entity, what have you, from this HTML file to something else. Relationship must be, so this is saying, okay, this is going to function as a, whatever I'm linking to, is going to function as a style sheet. Basically meaning that it's going to like work as CSS does with applying the stylings to the page. And this href is essentially just giving the link to that particular CSS file that we want to apply the styling for. And here's the name of this particular file. Again, your CSS file can really be named anything. But here, app.css is a very generic, commonly used CSS file name. It's going to differ like once you start adding more web pages. Like say I have an about page and a contact us page, and you know, maybe I have individual web pages for different blog articles. You can have individual CSS files for all those pages too. And you know, maybe the about page would be called about.html. And so I'd make a CSS file about.css, contact.html, contact.css. That's pretty common too. But yeah, this is how you link up overall. Yeah, happy to help. So now that we have this in place, we've seen that we can style individual HTML elements. We've seen that we can style classes. We can see that we can also style what we call IDs. Now IDs, you can only have one uniquely named ID, and it can only apply to one HTML element. So if I want to call this, what do I want to call this? Maybe just say priority message. Why not? I can take this ID and I can also style it in CSS. Now, when you use an ID versus a class and so on, kind of depends. Classes are used very, very often for styling CSS. In fact, I'd say that's usually the most common thing that people will style. So rather than styling individual HTML elements, a lot of times people will just assign classes and style those. Because again, you can use any class, any amount of elements of any sort of different types. So it's very common to style classes. IDs, I think it kind of depends on the developer and the context. Some people don't use IDs at all for styling. Others will use them in very particular cases. IDs, I feel like I usually see them utilized for JavaScript applications, where you can have JavaScript interact with the HTML and you point to the to an element's ID with that. But that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves right now. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But here we can see that I do row sets. Yeah. So let me do that. There we go. So you can aim for an ID with the what is this called? Not ampersand. Hashtag, I want to say, but makes my skin crawl. But you can target the ID with this symbol here, and then give the ID name, and you can style it from there. So that's just some of the different ways that you can style your HTML elements. I'd say, again, classes are definitely the most common way that I've seen. I think that's just kind of a strict rule, not a strict rule, but kind of a de facto way of styling is you tackle classes, you target classes. But in certain cases, you can do like HTML elements and the like too. But anyways, just going into some of these different attributes that you can style, like the text color, the font size, font weight, and everything. There's all sorts of different attributes that you can style in all sorts of different ways. So I've just done web development quite a bit, so I know just off the top of my head that, okay, color is one attribute and green is a particular color that you can use. And, it's not that you can just type anything willy-nilly that you want. There are certain attributes that you have to know about. There are certain stylings that you can do to those attributes that you have to know about, or like systems of styling that you have to know about. One of the best resources, in fact, let me bring this up now. Here, let me see. So class and ID is used to prioritize messages. Not exactly. That's just the class name that I gave this, like priority message and important message. You can call these anything. So we could call this like, I don't know, fluffy dogs. And we could call this turtle soup. And if you just target those, then you can call them anything, literally anything. You just the thing is that you want to name them in a way, ideally, that gives helpful context as to what the element is. So if I had, say, an image of turtle soup, then I would call this class something like turtle soup. But I'm not going to call it turtle soup if it says something like, if you love MLH, then you're in the right place, because this doesn't communicate the context well enough with that class name, right? So that's why I said, okay, maybe important message, because this is important for everyone that loves MLH, right? Or we could say another class name we could give it, like MLH adoration message or MLH adoration. We could say that. Again, it doesn't matter what you name it, just that you have a unique name to target that particular element, and ideally the name that you give helps communicate to the developer what it is exactly that you're targeting, right? Because if this is a paragraph tag, I don't want to call this like heading 1, because this is my heading 1, and that would just be confusing, right? If someone's jumping into the CSS code and they say, okay, here's heading 1, and they change it, they're going to expect that all these are going to apply to heading 1. They're not, right? The naming is just, you want to give helpful context to the developer and understand kind of what exactly they're editing. So I hope that clears it up. Yes, so your naming convention, while you can do basically anything, you do want it to be meaningful and communicating and communicative. Okay, so with that in place, that is just one of the aspects of, excuse me. That's kind of the basics of the very, very basics of styling with CSS. Now, there's a few aspects of CSS that are very, very helpful to know about. In fact, before I even get farther with that, what I want to show you all is a pretty helpful resource that you can use to learn all the more about HTML elements and methodologies of working with it. And it's crazy because I slept well. It's just kind of dark in here, and it's really cold because I had the window open. I think I read something before about how like yawning is a way for the brain to regulate its own temperature. I don't know if that's well, that's the funny thing. Like, it's only 5 p.m. here right now. I'm gonna take a drink of my waters because I've been talking for an hour. But it's only 5 p.m. here right now. So, and I got a good night's sleep. Here's my big jug of water. But yeah, maybe it's just kind of chilling here. My brain doesn't want to get cold. Only thing I can think of. I love web dev. I'm excited about that. So, uh, don't let my yawning fool you. So, anyways, what I wanted to show was a very helpful website, the MDN Docs. So let me share this. Resource for developers by developers. Okay, so basically MDM Docs is a resource where you can learn all about the different, just anything about HTML, CSS, JavaScript, including the specifics on particular elements and stylings and all of that. So here, let's say I want to learn more about the H1 tag in HTML. And click here, and it tells me all about these different heading elements, right? H1 through H6. Tells you about like why they're used, best practice, different attributes with it. You can do also like say let's say the image tag should have a little bit more interesting, unique information on it. Tells you about the different tags here, different image file formats, loading errors, stuff like that. Styling with CSS. So it really goes into depth on all of these things. These are really, really helpful things to know, these particular tags, just about your HTML elements in general. So I'm going to post this in the chat. Very, very helpful thing to know. So do I use Firefox for web dev versus Chrome? I like Chrome-based browsers just because it's what I've always used. I don't dislike Firefox. It's not what I've used to. So I always like the Chrome-based stuff. Let's see. It's keeping up on the chat. So with that, yeah, so if you want to learn more about your HTML elements and the like, definitely recommend this MDN Docs put together by the Mozilla team. Very, very helpful for learning about basic web dev stuff. You spend a lot of time on there learning all sorts of helpful information. So with that, let's delve into more aspects on it. Let's see. Google said the reason that one yawns when tired or bored is the body's attempt to keep you alert and awake. Yes, but that's the thing. I'm not tired or bored. What makes you think too, like why we yawn when other people yawn? Again, what I've read about that is, again, this is a big tangent, but I've read that it's like your brain trying to regulate its temperature, and if someone else is yawning in a room, it probably means that their brain needs temperature regulation. So yours might need temperature regulation as well if it's an environmental thing. So when you see other people yawn, that's why your brain like makes you yawn. I don't know. More of a fun fact than anything. I don't even know if that's like the full story, if that's entirely right, but interesting to think about at the very least. But all that said and done, let's jump back into web dev. So we learned HTML, CSS, MDM docs to help learn more about those. Let's talk about some other aspects of CSS that are very, very important to know about. So let's go back to, well, do I want to go back to my code? We can probably do this all in the browser at this point, honestly. Yeah, let's let's do this. We can stay here. So, well, actually, no, let's go back to the code because I have a different idea what we can do here. So I'm going to boot up my code editor here. Okay, so let's simplify my code a little bit. Not that it's too complex at the moment, but let's keep it to this. Have the turtle soup still. We can call it turtle soup, why not? Okay. So we'll look at a couple things. Let's comment this out for right now. So I have this H1 styling where I have this color red. Let's say I'm going to style the color again. So I'm going to make it green. So here I have two conflicting styles. I'm saying, okay, I want the H1 to be red. Here I'm saying I want the H1 to be green. So what exactly is going to happen? Is it going to be red? Is it going to be green? Is it going to break? Is it going to crash? What exactly does the code do to make this work in the end? So I'm not going to have to juggle my screens and everything, so I don't want to waste time on that. But what you would ultimately see is that the element would have green text. The reason why for that is, well, there's actually quite a few things that go into this. Let's start with the most basic. So we're styling the same element, all things considered equal. We have this color green further on down in the code. So with all other things being equal, whatever appears latest in the code, whatever appears further down is the style that's going to be used. So now I could swap this around, right? If I say, let's have the red be on the bottom, then the result is going to be red text. So this is when we start getting into what we call cascading aspect of the cascading style sheets. So what CSS stands for is cascading style sheets. So the style sheet aspect of it is, hey, we can give all these like different style declarations, right? We've already seen that. The cascading aspect of it is when you have conflicting styles, what wins out in the end? And the most fundamental example of this is like the placement in the code. Now, that's not the only thing that contributes to which styles went out, however. There's also sort of the priority of the element that's being styled. So some things have higher priority than others. So for example, there's a sort of hierarchy where HTML elements are sort of the lowest in terms of priority. Classes come next, and then IDs. And then there's a few others that are both higher and lower than these. But these are elements that these are things that we've already learned. So we'll stick with them for now. So let's say I have a conflicting style. Like here I have these two H1s. Again, all things being equal, we have this color here, green, color red. Since this is further down, red is going to win out. But we can see that classes have higher priority than HTML elements. So if I give this H1 a class, oops. So let's say and just call it that. We can say heading 1 again because you want your classes to communicate properly. Oops. Instead, if I don't target the generic HTML element, but I target a specific class that it dons, like this heading 1, what's going to win out is this heading 1 styling because the class has higher priority than a simple HTML element. Remember, we said that all things being equal, this bottom one will win out. But now things are not equal. This heading 1 has higher priority. So now in this case, it's going to be the green that displays. So two, we can go on if we wanted to. We said that IDs are higher, so same thing happens. If we have an ID, now this is even higher. So if we tried to target this class, now this heading 1 class, we'll have to give this an ID as well. Heading 1 ID, heading 1 class, we do that. So again, the this pound symbol makes it an ID. Tells us that we're targeting an ID. This period tells us that we're targeting a class. I just put the ID and the class in the name to make it really obvious as to what we're targeting. Right, an ID beats out a class. So again, all things being equal, we have a conflicting style. We're trying to style the text color. Then the green is going to win out here because the ID has higher priority than the class. So very, very important aspect of CSS. It can make organizing your code so much more efficient, organizing your styling so much more efficient when you start to use certain structures in your HTML and start styling systematically according to that. And two, it's important to know this just because, maybe you have conflicting styles and you don't know, maybe you're not aware of it, or you don't know how conflicting styles work. Helps you diagnose what's going on. If like something happens that you don't intend, helps just that cognizance helps you understand what's going on at the very least. And then with that understanding, you can go on to design styling solutions that are very elegant, efficient, so on and so forth. Because you can use this behavior of it, you can take advantage of it to make certain styling solutions that just make your code all the better. Probably the browser will choose the one that's highest weight, not just if it's the last one in the cascade. Yes, exactly. That's the best way to put it. Yeah, CSS specificity, that's the exact name of it. The concept is CSS specificity overall. And yeah, specificity calculators are very, very helpful, especially when you're first getting a feeling for the concept of specificity overall. So again, specificity being like which one is going, like specificity being like the rating of an element in terms of whether it'll ultimately win out or not relative to another element when you have clashing style declarations. So very, very helpful. In fact, we can jump into this specificity.keegan.st. Let's take a look. So let's share our screen here. We'll take a look at the specificity calculator. And yeah, this is a really good learning tool just when you're trying to wrap your head around this. So can we edit this here? All right, so we can see that if I just have, again, if we just have an H1, then a generic, basically what happens is that the higher up these are, like if you have one instance of an ID, then that gives you like a specificity rating that'll beat out like just a class or a generic element. So here I have my H1, I just have 1 point in the generic element aspect. And if I say, again, like that turtle soup, we can see we have 1 point here in this aspect that's higher than the generic HTML element. So if I just have like this H1 versus this class here, if there were a styling dispute where they're both trying to style the same thing, the styling that belongs to this class here is going to ultimately win out and display on the page. And two, if we make this into an ID instead, that'll win out. So even if we have a class here, like heading 1, again, you can see the points of how they're compared. The ID is going to win. Same way the last one is chosen. Right. Yeah. So that's That's why it's so important to specify all things being equal. And the last one in the code wins. But as we can see with this concept of CSS specificity, things can very much well not be equal. And when they're not equal, this is the system that determines which is displayed or not. So very, very important aspect to CSS. You definitely want to get a grapple on this to understand how your styling and the like will work and how it'll manifest throughout the page. So with that being said, a couple other aspects of CSS to be aware of. I don't want to get to a little bit of JavaScript, but we will, I think we should be able to. We've got what, like 45 minutes just about left. So we'll have enough time. But with that, let's see what we got here. So one of the things that CSS will also do is handle page responsiveness. In fact, let's actually go to the web browser for this. Let's go to MLH. Let me share my screen on this. And what exactly do I mean by page responsiveness? That is a good question. So overall, we can see that I'm going to try and resize the web browser. You can see how the page dynamically adapts. So when it's wide like this, when you say this navigation bar, for example, it's a bit more spaced out. We have these different buttons here. We have all these different attribute or all these different elements that we can click on and see more information and the like. But as I narrow the page, so one thing that just happened is this moved below the logo here. Instead of staying on the same line and like continuing on or so on and so forth, this actually gets pushed down. So if I keep going, those two buttons disappeared. So now it's back on the same row, but those two buttons disappeared. So keep going, keep going. Now we have a hamburger menu here, and we can see that the logo changed size as well. So like the buttons disappearing, the hamburger menu coming up, like that's not an accident. This was programmed to happen at different screen sizes, because if you try to have all of this shown here at a very narrow screen size, then it would just look kind of wonky. Like either the text would have to get really, really small, so it'd be hard to click on, or whoa, okay, the text would have to be really small, or things would just like, you know, go off the screen and even cover the logo and everything. So we can see that in some other aspects here too. So at first we have like this smaller button off to the side, but as the screen gets narrower, it gets its own row. Looks like, what else happens? This column layout here too. So here we have kind of like a, you know, two column layout here. We have all these articles on the one. We have these additional aspects of the page on the right hand side. But as we make the page narrower, it gets moved. And now this is now these elements get really, really big on the smaller screen size. So they kind of take up the screen. Looks nice, but we can tell it's a definite difference. Right? These images become huge. So the main point to this is that this stuff just doesn't happen automatically. It's not an accident. Worst case, if there was no responsiveness, the responsiveness is the concept of like designing your web page to dynamically adapt to different screen sizes. So it's not the fact that, you know, someone's going to be on the web browser and they're going to be doing this all day. It's that you want your website to look good on desktop. You also want it to look good on like a tablet, and you want it to look good on mobile. Or two, if someone changes their screen width, you want it to look good and be accessible on any screen width. CSS also makes that possible. So that's when you start getting into media queries and all those sorts of CSS elements. So I recommend reading about that on MDN Docs especially. But what you can do is you can ultimately tell your CSS, hey, at this screen size, when the screen is, like 1000 pixels wide, for example, you can say use this styling. In fact, we can even go into here. We can actually simulate that in the browser DevTools. We click this icon up here. It's kind of nice. We can go, let's see. Oops. We see we can test out these different breakpoints in the design. Basically, check out these different the different like key areas in the design where the website changes, or the CSS programs the styling differently. So here we have what's called the tablet size, 768. Here we can go to, actually, we have to show, this is just the browser's default. You can actually show the breakpoints. Yeah, you can show the media queries as the site was designed. So here, the browser has its own kind of default sizes for different devices, but the CSS also has, in the page, has different specifications for different like exact screen widths. So it looks like we have 10,000 or 1,024 pixels, like a large desktop size. We're going to have the site look like this. As we move, we get into this breakpoint range, 923. Something changes there. We move when we get into this range here, 767, more of a like tablet view. We have these different stylings where we saw, right? We have one column here. We have these big images for these article entries, so on and so forth. So responsive design is a very, very big aspect of the web nowadays. You need your website to look good on desktops and mobile and everything in between, all sorts of different screen sizes and devices. So approaching a website from the perspective of responsive design is absolutely vital. In fact, a lot of developers nowadays will actually, even if they're developing on their desktop, which most likely they are, most developers nowadays, at least the ones that I know, will start from a mobile screen size first to make sure that their site looks good from there. There's quite a few reasons to it. One of the big ones is that most people are accessing the web on their phone. I think over 50% of internet traffic now happens on mobile devices. So a large portion of your user base is going to be on the phone. You better make sure that your mobile site is top notch. Of course, everything should be, but all the better for your mobile site to be as well. There's a few other aspects too, like mobile is pretty easy to get working. If you have a complex, like desktop designs are a little bit more dynamic, you can have a lot more going on in terms of the layout and everything. But mobile, ultimately, everything has to kind of come into this one column design. So you want to make sure that your design works in this more simple one column layout before you go on to designing more dynamic layouts for like dynamic in terms of its details, where like things are placed and everything. Want to make sure that it works well on mobile first before you go and do dynamic designs. So just stuff like that. But yeah, CSS is super, super important for responsive design as well. So with that, just good things to know about CSS and HTML. Okay, let's see. Let me keep up with the chat here. I was watching a tutorial where he started building the website for the mobile layout first, then for tablet and laptop screen size. That was a pretty unique approach. Yeah, so as we were saying, that's actually more orthodox nowadays. That's how a lot of people will approach it. So yeah, exactly. Mobile first approach. It makes it easier to design larger later. So yeah, I know it was a bit, when I first came across mobile design or mobile first approach to design, it kind of struck me too, because it's like, well, I'm working on a desktop and I do most of my web browsing on desktop at least. So that was kind of where I naturally went to at first. And two, whenever you go through like programming tutorials and everything, when you're first learning HTML, CSS, they always teach you in desktop view just because it's, probably don't want to mess around with getting people to learn about different viewpoints ports and all that and screen widths before they can even type basic HTML and CSS. So they probably don't even want you to worry about that at first, just to not overwhelm you. But it is the case that a lot of times people will do the mobile first way of design. However, I read it's, everything in life is contextual, especially like when it comes to professional problems. I've read like online forums and the like where people say, like say you have a smaller business or whatever, go off of your user statistics in terms of what devices do they primarily use your service on. Make sure that's high quality first, and then go on to like your other screen size. So there's like different philosophies and the like. Ultimately, everything has to work well, but mobile first definitely has its advantages, and it makes it a very popular option in terms of in the development process today. So that's the basic of HTML and CSS. We have about like 30 minutes left. Would you all rather, I guess there's kind of two ways that we can go here. We can either show some basics of JavaScript and then try to build a very, very simple web page, or we can delve deeper into JavaScript and just see how they all tie in together. Can we learn some JavaScript? Yes, we can certainly learn some JavaScript. Kind of dive deeper into that. Yeah, dive deeper into JavaScript. Sure. Yeah, perfectly good. Take my swig of my water here. I haven't yawned in a few, so maybe I'm either getting all the more excited about this stuff or maybe it warmed up in here. Who knows? Definitely feel a little bit warmer. So, with all that being said, so content and structure of the page, HTML, styling and presentation, as we talked about, CSS. Now we can start getting into the functionality, which is the famous or infamous JavaScript in some people's eyes. Some people love JavaScript. I personally don't have any qualms with it. I find it to be a perfectly good technology to work with. Other people that come from other programming languages find JavaScript a little bit, I don't know what their deal is. They have a little bit of an issue with it, but I think it's perfectly nice. Definitely built for web stuff. So if you're a web developer, interested in web development, JavaScript is definitely a good thing to pick up, especially if you're doing like basic front-end web dev. So with that, let's get some JavaScript going. So I am going to share my code editor once more. Let's see what we have here. So same thing as our CSS file at the very beginning. We want to make a JavaScript file. This can be called anything, but again, a generic name for your JavaScript file is something like app.js. As long as it's anything.js, as long as it's .js, you've got a JavaScript file in your hands. So here I have this. Now for a JavaScript to function and communicate with our HTML page, we, just like how we had to link up our CSS file, we have to link up our JavaScript file. So we can do this with the scripts. Script source. So script tells us that we're going to be dealing with scripting files, and source is going to point us, wants us to get the file that we want our scripting info from, which is going to be this app.js. And that's all you need. So just like for very, very basic stuff, like with your beginning web dev, a lot of people will put their scripts file at the very end of their of the HTML file. Well, there's a couple of things that we have to know about HTML and CSS too when it comes to actually utilizing them in a real web page, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. For now, you can just put the script at the bottom. It's perfectly fine. But here, I have my JavaScript file. Now, JavaScript is a bona fide, genuine programming language. So people will argue that HTML and CSS are not programming languages. They are basically markup. Now, I mean, the distinction is basically what they mean by that is JavaScript is more like languages like Python, Swift, so on and so forth. They're actual like scripting languages, programming languages. They share similar concepts together. Whereas HTML is kind of its own thing. CSS is kind of its own thing. So with this, we can do what we can do in most programming languages. Again, like Python or Swift or what have you. We can do basic logic, like 2 + 2. In fact, let's go to the web browser first, because we can actually do JavaScript in the web browser, just like how we can do HTML and CSS. And with that too, I think it will. Oops, hold on. By doing it in the web browser, it'll just let us work a little bit more fluidly at first. So that way I don't have to juggle my different screens and the like. But here, let's start doing some basic JavaScript. So I have my developer web tools up. Again, I can just press in Chrome at least. It's just F12. I'm going to go to the console here. Sometimes you just get random error messages on websites. I'm just going to clear that so that we have this blank slate to work with. So here I can do JavaScript. So JavaScript will handle 2 + 2, boom, 4. So it can handle mathematics. Just some basic stuff with programming languages. You have different data primitive types, they're called. So we have numbers that we can see, and with numbers we can do anything that you can expect to do with numbers. We can do calculations and so on and so forth. Can you actually run that? No. Okay. Anyways, you can do different things with numbers, like basic arithmetic and algebra, whatever you want to do with numbers that you usually do, you can do. We also have strings, which represent text. So if I say this is a string, then you put strings in parentheses. You can either do not parentheses, and quotation marks. You can either do single quotes or double quotes. Both work. So if I say this is a string, it just repeats that back. But you can do certain things to strings. You can do there's different, I just use the string method, right? I alter the string with this. There's all sorts of things that you can do with strings. You can, we'll kind of explore some of those in just a few minutes, but you can alter the string data, just like you can do stuff with the numbers to alter them, so on and so forth. What else is there? There's Booleans. So Booleans ultimately return true or false. So if I say, if 2 + 2, actually, I don't think that will return it back. Here I am getting a little rusty on my JavaScript. I've been working with Python for months now. I'm trying to think of how to do that again. We go is Boolean. Is that true? No. Shoot. Anyways, once I'm back in my code editor, it'll certainly get back to me. But yeah, so we have numbers, we have strings that we can deal with. We have different Booleans. So Booleans will just tell you if something is true or false. True is true, false is false. We can also ask, is 2 + 3, does that equal 7? And then it'll say true or false to us. Stuff like that. So these are the very, very basic building blocks to being able to accomplish certain things with scripting. Let's actually go into the code base, and we can start to explore some of those different aspects of scripting together. You can see how this all sorts, and you can see how all this fits in, how do the numbers, the strings, and Boolean, and all that sort of stuff, how does it fit into actually solving problems, into actually accomplishing things for us? So what I can do is, so here we are in JavaScript. So I can say, if 2 + 2 equals 4, I can say, print the math works. Else, so if 2 + 2 does not equal 4, or I can say else if 2 plus 2 does not equal 4. We can say that math is broken. Or we say math works not, because it's faster to type. So I can go, I'm gonna run this, right? Ooh, I wonder if I can run that actually. Like here in VS Code. I feel like there has to be a way. Anyways, we have this. I can just refresh this here. Oops. Whoa. My browser is screaming at me now. It's really annoying. But anyways, so we have that going. So we can utilize this basic logic here. Let's see. In your last year of your CS bachelor's. Nice. I'm actually just in my first year now. So what do they say when it's a circle of life, something like that. I don't know. You have your ending, I have my beginning. Taking a JavaScript as an elective next semester. That should be sweet. Yeah, web stuff is fun. That's for sure. But anyways, so you can go on to like accomplish things like this. So we can also do like, I don't know, there's all sorts of stuff that you can get into when it comes to scripting and the like. But some of the most basic things that you can do with JavaScript don't even really, I don't want to say that, but there are some more pertinent things that we can cover instead of like doing calculations and Boolean logic and everything to give certain results. One of the most basic things that we can do is this. So we can, so what I'm going to do in HTML, I'm going to create a button. I'm going to call this button, I'm going to give this an ID. We'll say print button. Click me for a message. So you can see I gave this button ID. What I can do in JavaScript is I can say, okay, well, in my HTML document, I want to target this button here. In fact, let's type button quickly. Boom. I want to target this button. And I can give this button a variable name so that we can refer to it easily. So we can say print button is going to refer to this element in the HTML. And so for this button, we say print button add. What is going on here? Okay, what is the difference between using double equals and triple equals? I've seen it while learning JavaScript, but I still don't get it. Okay, very, very good question. In fact, we can cover this right now. So if we say if 2 plus 2 equals 4, we can say return this is true. Okay, so what this double and this triple equal signs do, first let's distinguish it from like the single equal sign. So the single equal sign will assign something to, like, say, a variable. So if I say my name equals like Zane, so this single one will now say, okay, my name is going to have the value of Zane, right? It assigns. The double equal sign, however, and the triple equal sign, they both are logic checks. They check if something, they check for Boolean logic. Like, is it true that, like, it's going to check this 2 plus 2 against this 4, right? Are they actually equal? Rather than assign, they check. Same thing with this triple one here. But the difference is that this double equal sign is a bit more loose in terms of what it considers to be equal or not. So if I do this, if I have 2 plus 2, so these are numbers, these are number data type, 2 plus 2, equals 4, but this 4 is a string. So the data types are fundamentally different. However, the double equal sign will just kind of wave that away. It recognizes that, okay, well, we'll try some different data types for this, where it doesn't matter if this 4 is a string or a number, as long as you have the general idea, then this will return as true. So this is a more, this is like a less strict check. Whereas the triple equal sign also takes type into account. So if it's 2 plus 2, triple equals sign equals 4, then this is actually going to be false, because you're also checking for type there. So that's the ultimate purpose behind it. Now you might ask, okay, well, why not, like, well, if this is just going to be, right, 2 plus 2 equals 4 in any case, then why don't I just use this? There's quite a few situations where type will be important. So you can, like, say we want to say, what do we want to do? What can I say? So say that you want to handle something differently if something is, say, okay, so let's say I have this number here. Let's say number is equal to 4 as a string. So we can say if num is equal to 4 as a string, then we can say that if num equals, num, can we do like is string? Let me check in JavaScript. So one of the most important aspects too of being able to program, again, this sounds super crazy, I swear it's the case, is being able to Google things effectively. So I'm going to go onto Google, search up, how do I check whether something is a string in JavaScript or not? Let's do that really quickly. You work with all sorts of different technologies. You ultimately get a little rusty. But you say check string JavaScript. That's string. Is string function. Use type of. Okay, here. So we have like this basic setup here. So we can do something like this. To where we go, if type of num, so num is a string, right? Because we have this here. So if type of num is equal to a string, then we can say, okay, this is a string, else it's not a string. I mean, the reason why this is important is because you can do different things depending on the type of your input. Like here, I'm just saying, is this a string? Is this not a string? But what I could do, for example, is if it is a string, I can do things that only strings can have done to them. Like I can do to uppercase, for example. Right, numbers can't utilize this method on them, whereas strings can. Well, I mean, this is the letter 4 or number 4, so it's not like uppercase is going to work. But ultimately, you can start to implement like more complex logic here. Like say if this accepts a string rather than a number, then you can do all sorts of different like you can basically build like this whole world of functionality that only works for strings compared to like if the type is a number. So that's why I don't know, like type is certainly important, whether your data is a string or number or Boolean or what have you. It's a little bit outside the scope of what we're talking about today in terms of exploring like really getting deep into like checking the type of your data and things that are possible with certain types and so on and so forth. Just know that's a really important thing to be cognizant of. So in fact, typing is so important that there's actually well, I guess what would you want to call it? there's sort of a super language built on top of JavaScript called TypeScript, which the whole purpose of TypeScript is to give more tools and methodologies and such to deal with the typing of your data, whether something is numbers or strings, Boolean, so on and so forth. Because typing is so fundamental to how your program handles data that if you have little leaks or little back doors and the like for your program to accidentally mess up in terms of typing, things can just go awry. Or if types aren't specifically defined very concretely, it can make the development process a lot slower and a lot more ambiguous when people are actually jumping into your code and getting their hands dirty. So typing is super, super, super important, especially once you get more advanced. You don't have to worry about it all too much right now. As ThinkVerse said here, like, you can get away with loose equality for a while. It's really not that big of a deal when you're very, very first learning. But it is important to know about like this, loose equality and strict equality comparisons. So I hope that answers it. So can you show how you got the button to work in the HTML doc? Yes. Let's get back to that. So ultimately, I made this button element. I gave it an ID so that we can tackle it, or so that we can target it very simply. So I'm saying that, so to get this element, we have to do document.querySelector with the ID. So that tells JavaScript, hey, we have this element in our HTML. Here it is. And we give it a variable name just that we can, that way we don't have to like type this out every time. Kind of just using it as a nickname here. So for this print button, let's make sure this is typed right. We can do .add. Why can I not do add event listener? Let me see. Yeah, definitely happy to help. Where am I going now? Okay, button, how does that work? Let's do JavaScript. Add event listener, again, just doing a little Google foo right now. Sometimes my code editor, no, okay, it is accepting JavaScript, weird. Why is it not letting me do that then? Add document. Why would you need document query selector? That's weird. This is already, here, let's do this. Very interesting. So it's letting me do all this here. Here, yeah, like add event listener. So strange. Usually that should, right? You can see that document.querySelector this .add event listener. So normally you can do that if you just assign this to a variable. So unless there's something I'm missing here. Here we go, add event listener. Okay. Well, that I already typed out. Okay, looks like it's working. I guess this is not getting me the drop down. It's a little annoying, but that's okay. So let's see. Oh man, how do we do this again? I think we do this. Then we say, so we do that. So we want to say what sort of event is it listening for? Because there's a few different events. So basically, what this code means right now is we have my button, and we're saying, hey, when something happens to this button, I want you to run the code here. And so there's all sorts of things that can happen to a button. I mean, your first thought is that you could click it, but well, there's all sorts of things that can happen to an HTML element in general, including a button. You can click it, which is the most obvious. You could also hover your mouse over it. You could also, if it's like a web page, like if you target a page or something with that's scrollable, you can target when it's scrolled. But we're not going to do anything too crazy here. We're going to just click it. And do we do that? Yes. So we say, so when we click this button, we're going to print You clicked me, tee. So we're gonna do that. So just to understand this overall, again, we have this button in HTML. We give it an ID so that we can specifically target it. In JavaScript, we say document.querySelector, print button. This basically just lets us target that button. So we're going to capture it in this variable. And then we say for this button, we're going to add an event listener that when you click upon it, it's going to print this message. It's going to print it in our console. But what you could do is you could also, for example, well, let's do this first. Let's see if it works. So we are going to load up the web browser and see how this works. Okay, see, we have our button here. First, we have this very, very small screen. Let's zoom in a little bit here. There we go. So if I click it, it should print off on the right-hand side. Well, that's weird. Why is it printing? That was happening before. I don't know why it was doing that. Okay, beautiful. Well, let's try this in a different browser because I think this is just Brave being weird. The joy of technical difficulties. And then my DevTools in Chrome is going to a different. That is so weird. For some reason, whenever I click on the web page, it just tries to print it. I don't understand. Oh, is it just print? Okay, hold on. I was going to say, I'm thinking, oh my goodness. Right. In Python, it's just print. See, I'm getting my languages mixed up here. That's exactly why. That's fun. So instead of print, what you do in Python, in JavaScript, you want to do console.log. So that makes perfect sense. Okay, so now, so we say console.log, right? That will do it. So now when we switch over, I guess that's on me, right? I'm literally telling it to print the web page. So anyways, let's boot this back up again. That's fun. I don't know. It's interesting because you'll learn different technologies and the like, and you get kind of rusty with them. But I don't know. He's got to de-rust, get back to the swing of things. So anyways, I have this opened up. Go into my browser DevTools. Now when I click it, there we go. See, now it has this message here. You clicked me, tee. I clicked it twice, so it has that 2 there. I keep clicking it. Right, I'm just making it giggle a million times over now. Got 8 times. There we go. So with that, that's basic functionality there. Now, you can make things print to the console, but you can also edit things on the web page itself too. This is where it really gets interesting. This is where you can see that it's like actually really, really helpful to have JavaScript in your arsenal, because what we can do is we can say, okay, let's target this. We can target the H1, right, like the header on the page. So we'll do the same thing. We'll go document.querySelector. We'll do heading 1, and we're going to target that heading 1. Or we can even just do, that works fine. Why not? So we have this here. And now we'll say when we click this button, we want to take heading 1. We do text. Why are you not? Oh, because this. Here. Okay, still a little bit lost on why you're doing this to me. No. Let's do this then. Document.querySelector, that heading 1, and we'll say text content, we're going to set that to you clicked me, you clicked the button. Close it off. Okay, so now what should happen in theory is that we can click on the button and now it'll change the content on the page itself. And now you can just imagine what that, like the implications of that. Right, so now when I click this button, this should change. See, you click the button. So do that again. Right, it says MLH fan website. We click the button. Boom, changes the text content here. So that explains what happens here in this MLH page. Right, I have this hamburger button. I click it. What do you think is going on with this hamburger button after I click it? You have this functionality here. So what's happening most likely is this hamburger button, it's an HTML element, likely has an event listener on it, just like how we had for our button there. So if I can get this dragged down at least. Let's see. Why is this so high up? Let's do that. Yeah. So we can see we have this button here. And we have the functionality for it where if we go to sources, can we do that? Oh, that'll be something that'll be quite the thing to find. But anyways, you can just trust you have the same thing going on, right? You have this button here, likely have an event listener on it that says the same thing, right? Add event listener upon click, then edit the HTML in this way. Make it so that this becomes visible now. And when you click it again, you can click it once more to toggle that. Make it visible, invisible, visible, invisible. And you can do that for all sorts of different things on your web page. So anything that you can imagine really in terms of your functionality, JavaScript will allow you to do. So with all of that, that is really our intro to web dev here. We've seen how HTML ultimately contributes to a page. In fact, we can look at this MLH page here for that, right? We have all of our content, like our text, our images, and different buttons and icons, stuff like that. We have our CSS, which we saw helps lay everything out, helps us like give color, give spatial positioning, text size, fonts, all sorts of different stuff in terms of the presentation of the website. And then we saw how JavaScript contributes to the functioning of the web page. We saw that we can, like we rigged up that little button and all sorts of other things with JavaScript are possible. So we have just a few minutes here, really just, well, basically 2, but I hope that was insightful. We had a couple little nice moments along the way. I think that was pretty fun. So we'll start to bring things to a close here. If there's any like final questions or anything that anyone has, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll just bring things to a close here. Yes, now it's properly dark out. Daylight saving time. Very, very good suggestion thing first. Yes, we are going to have hacking with JavaScript. If you want to learn more about JavaScript, definitely check that out. Very fun language and very essential if you want to do front-end web development, especially. Let's see. Wednesday. JavaScript. Looks like this event. Let me check my calendar because yeah, this event link says. Well, this is for October 18th. Weird. Hold on. Let me see. 7. Oh, okay. No, here we go. But yeah, we are at the end of the hour. So thank you all for joining me today. I hope you guys learned got some insight on the intro to web dev. With that, have a good rest of your days.